I told the alien princess she was beautiful. Her reaction changed everything. Nolan was used to noise. His apartment on Earth had been above a noodle shop that ran 24-hour delivery drones. His siblings were louder than malfunctioning engines, and even his thoughts had a way of shouting at him when the rest of their world went quiet. So when he was assigned a shared cabin aboard the Varela with someone who could apparently go entire days without saying a word, he felt like he'd been paired with a ghost with long ears and the posture of someone trying to disappear into her own shadow. Her name was Olaria. That much he knew. Olari, species designated cultural specialist and linguist, second rotation on the bridge and officially the quietest being he'd ever encountered. She had a pale complexion that shimmered faintly under the ship's lighting, silver white hair tied in a neat braid, and those long elegant ears that twitched ever so slightly when the captain barked orders. She didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even hum in the shower. Nolan, ever the curious type, was already plotting ways to make her laugh by day 3. So he said one evening halfway through reassembling a food printer in their shared kitchenette, "Do you sleep standing up, or is that just a cultural stereotype?" She didn't look up from her datapad. "Incorrect assumption," she said quietly. He waited, nothing more, just 2 words, and back to silence. "I'll mark that as." Possibly offended but polite about it, he muttered. She flicked her gaze toward him for a split second, like she was evaluating if he deserved to be acknowledged further. Apparently not. Later that night, Nolan found a sticky note on the console near his bunk. "Olari, sleep horizontally, we are not bats." It was written in perfect cursive. He stared at it for a moment before bursting out laughing. From that point on, he made it a personal mission: crack the code of their quiet alien roommate. Every day brought a new attempt. He left jokes on sticky notes. He programmed the cabin AI to play ridiculous Earth trivia when she entered the room. He made up fake human customs like Tuesday Antler Appreciation Hour, just to see if she'd blink. She didn't, but on day 10 he caught the corners of her mouth twitching upward. That was enough to fuel him for a week. Eloria, for her part, seemed resigned to his nonsense. She never asked him to stop, never requested reassignment. She did, however, subtly reprogram the food printer to spit out nutrient cubes shaped like small emotionless cubes. His least favorite form. Nolan took it as a declaration of passive-aggressive war. On day 15 the toaster exploded. Technically it was a contained energy discharge due to a misaligned plasma coil, but Nolan still maintained it was the toaster's fault. He'd been trying to make grilled cheese. What he got instead was a burst of flame, a smoking countertop, and a very dramatic leap backward that landed him on the floor. Crew rushed in, alarms went off. Someone yelled, "His killed breakfast," which, while not entirely inaccurate, felt a little unfair. In the middle of the chaos, Olaria stepped forward, calmly entered a few override commands into the console, and rerouted the energy output. The alarm stopped, the smoke cleared, the grilled cheese was charcoal, and she turned to Nolan and said in that same soft voice, "Human technology is ambitious." The entire room burst out laughing. Nolan, still on the floor, just stared up at her. "Wait, did you just?" Was that sarcasm? She blinked once. "That would depend on how you define it." After the crowd dispersed, he found another note near his bunk. "Ambitious. Adjective 1, having or showing a strong desire and determination to succeed. 2, excessively so, as in setting a toaster to plasma mode." He taped it to his wall. They didn't become best friends overnight, but the air in the room changed. It grew lighter. Didn't smile much, but she sat with him now during quiet hours. Sometimes she even nodded when he made a joke. Once she offered him a cup of her weird Eli tea, green, thick, and probably sentient. He sipped it, gagged, and whispered, "I think your culture hates taste buds." "I warned you," she said, deadened. "It's medicinal or mildly vengeful." "Both." He started leaving doodles on her data screen when she wasn't looking, tiny alien cats with long ears and serious expressions. One morning he found his sketch returned with annotations pointing out anatomical inaccuracies. He responded by drawing one wearing a tiny space helmet and a Linguist of the Year sash. Somewhere around day 22 he noticed something new. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Her expressions were subtle, infinite decimal shifts in the curve of her lips, the tilt of her head, but they were their interest. Amusement, maybe even curiosity. One night during their shared observation shift he found her already at the deck's edge, staring out at the stars. He walked up beside her, sipping the last of his Terrible tea and said, if you stare long enough the stars start winking at you. She didn't look away from the view that's a symptom of retinal strain. Romantic, she glanced at him. Is that what? You're being romantically strained always. She shook her head but didn't leave. That felt like progress. Then came the moment, the one he didn't plan. He was helping her recalibrate a translation matrix. Their hands brushed. She tensed. He pulled back then impulsively said, you know you're actually very beautiful. Silence, a different kind this time, not the casual, everyday quiet she wore like armor. This was frozen, glassy. A moment held in stasis. She looked at him wide-eyed. Her ears twitched, then stilled. Her lips parted slightly but no sound came out. Her data pad slipped from her hands and hit the table with a soft clack. She started, then abruptly turned away, her voice trembling. Please excuse me. And just like that she was gone, leaving Nolan standing there holding a translation matrix in a heart full of confusion. Nolan spent the next 2 hours pacing their shared cabin like a man who had just insulted the ship's AI and was waiting for it to vent him into space. He replayed the moment 100 times in his head, each version slightly more dramatic than the last. In one, she slapped him with her data pad. In another, she evaporated into stardust while screaming, you fool. The reality, her leaving quietly, eyes wide and voice trembling, was somehow worse, less like a rejection and more like he'd cracked something fragile and important without meaning to. Great job, Romeo, he muttered to himself, stopping only to trip over his own boots and nearly take down a chair. You told the emotionally reserved alien that she's beautiful, and now she probably thinks you're proposing interstellar marriage or challenging her to a duel or both. He sat down, groaning into his hands. What the hell does beautiful even mean to her species? The AI chimed in cheerfully. Would you like me to query Ilari's socio-cultural databases for the term beautiful? No, Janice, he sighed, but thank you for your deeply unhelpful timing. Noted, I will remain unhelpful until further notice. Janice had developed a sarcastic streak ever since Nolan tried to program her to mimic old Earth sitcom characters. Now she was half database, half digital stand-up comic. He had no one to blame but himself. By the time his next duty rotation started, Arya still hadn't returned to their quarters. Her side of the cabin remained undisturbed, the data pad still lying where she dropped it. He almost picked it up, then thought better of it. No touching the alien's things, especially not after compliment-induced emotional collapses. He found her later on Deck 3 in the language lab, surrounded by holographic alphabets and phonetic symbols floating mid-air. She didn't look at him when he entered, just continued typing on a floating console, her fingers moving in graceful precision. Nolan stood there awkwardly. Hey, so about earlier, she didn't pause. I have recalibrated the translator matrix. It no longer converts the word spork into galactic conquest. That's helpful, he said, stepping closer. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I was trying to be nice, not I don't know, accidentally commit a cultural sin. You did not offend me. That's good. You startled me. Oh, she stopped typing there. Silence wrapped around them tight and humming. Then she turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable among their Eli. Aesthetic appreciation is private. It is neither spoken nor acknowledged. To call someone beautiful openly is deeply intimate. Nolan swallowed. Right, so I basically confess my undying love in public. Not exactly, she said, folding her arms, but contextually adjacent. Cool. Definitely not sweating through my uniform right now, I can tell. Really, number, I'm not a moisture sensor. He blinked. Did she just? He wasn't sure if she was being serious or deadpan. All. Arya sighed softly, almost imperceptibly. Your compliment was not unwelcome, Nolan. He looked up. I simply did not know what to do with it. Well, he said, trying to summon a grin. Most people just say thanks or roll their eyes and walk away. I am not most people. No argument here. There was a pause, not the kind that made Nolan want to crawl into a maintenance duct and hide, but the kind that asked for patience. I've never been called beautiful before, she said finally, not even by my own family. It's considered a distraction, a dangerous indulgence. He frowned. That's messed up. It's tradition. Still messed up. She tilted her head. On Earth, is it common to say such things all the time? He said, we toss compliments around like confetti. It's how we flirt. Diffuse tension. Sell shampoo when elections I see, and when someone says it sincerely, it usually scares the hell out of people that earn the smallest smile. A real one, soft and hesitant, like she was testing the shape of it. I wasn't trying to scare you, he said gently. I just think you're really something You're quiet sure but not because you're empty, it's like you're made of meaning. You speak when it matters and when you don't it still does. Her ears twitched. Also he added, you single-handedly saved my life from the toaster, which is worth at least 3 compliments in my book. You exaggerated the danger. The flames were metaphorical, they were not, they singed your socks metaphorically. She turned back to the console but her fingers didn't move. I don't dislike you, Nolan, that's the nicest thing anyone said to me this week. I may even enjoy your presence occasionally. Stop, he said, staggering backward. Too much emotion, I need a paper bag. She actually laughed, a quiet breathy thing that barely made sound but managed to echo louder than the ship's engines. I should return to work, she said but didn't move. Right, I should too, probably go fix something I broke or pretend to. He started to turn away but she stopped him. Wait. He turned back, hesitated, then stepped closer and looked him in the eye. You are not visually displeasing. It took him a moment. Wait, was that your version of calling me beautiful? I'm adapting. He grinned so hard his cheeks hurt. Aria, that might be the single most romantic insult I've ever received. She handed him a data chip. These are the approved Ilari compliments, study them, avoid cultural collapse. He took it solemnly. This is their most homework I've ever wanted to do. As he left he turned back one last time. She was already back at the console but her posture had changed, less tense, more open. Maybe he hadn't broken something after all. Maybe he just knocked on a door that hadn't been opened in a long time. Maybe next time she'd open it wider, or maybe she'd throw a data pad at his head. Either way, he was in the next week. Aboard the Varela was uneventful by galactic standards, which meant only one attempted mutiny, 3 engine hiccups, and 1 crew member stuck in a duct trying to retrieve a space hamster. He definitely wasn't supposed to have. Nolan took it as a sign from the universe that things were relatively speaking going well, which was strange because something inside him felt completely off kilter. It wasn't bad, more like he was slightly out of orbit, subtly pulled by a new gravitational force. The name of that force, of course, was Aria. She hadn't vanished after their awkwardly emotional conversation in the language lab. Quite the opposite. She was present, still quiet, still composed, still speaking in complete measured thoughts, like a philosophy professor with a side hustle and precision weaponry. But now there was something else beneath the surface, a softness in her gaze when she caught him looking, the occasional pause as if she was waiting for his joke before she reacted, and sometimes, rarely but gloriously, there were smiles, actual measurable expressions of amusement. One even included a snort. It was magical. It was also terrifying. Nolan didn't have a protocol for this. He had playbooks for flirting. Yes, flirt with humans easy. Flirt with tentacled beings from aquatic worlds a little harder but manageable. With enough waterproof charm, flirt with a reserved long-eared alien linguist who might interpret compliments as declarations of war not covered in any manual. So he did the only logical thing. He invited her to lunch. The mess hall was unusually crowded, probably due to a recent menu update that added vegan protein nuggets with extra flavor. The extra flavor turned out to be cilantro and regret, but Nolan took a tray anyway. Ilaria sat across from him, poking curiously at a bowl of something green and gelatinous. What is this? She asked. Jelly salad. It's a crime against both salads and jelly. Why is it moving? That's part of the fun, he said, stabbing his nugget with a little too much effort. So how's the translation module coming? I'm expanding the algorithm to include gesture-based dialects like talking with your hands. Yes, many species communicate using postural syntax. Humans do that too, he said, except usually when we do it, it means we're angry in traffic. She tilted her head. So flailing is emotional punctuation exactly! Exclamation points with elbows. She nodded, completely serious, as if she were cataloging this for future analysis. Fascinating. He chewed for a moment, then wiped his mouth. Hey, I've been meaning to ask that data chip you gave me. Eli compliments, some of them were intense. She blinked, such as, your mind is a well of glacial thought. Your presence is less unbalancing than most, and my personal favorite, I tolerate your nearness with minimal internal resistance. Illyria looked mildly amused. Those are high praise, right? But on Earth, if someone said, I tolerate your nearness, would probably call security. That explains your species' emotional volatility. Harsh but fair, he said. So if I wanted to compliment you in your language, really do it properly. What's the gold standard? She considered. There is one phrase it is rarely used. I'm listening. Atfilin Axilra. He repeated it slowly, almost reverently. What does it mean? She met his gaze. It means I find comfort in the pattern of your thoughts. He froze. Whoa, that's weirdly intimate. It is reserved for those who have shared deep understanding. Has anyone ever said it to you? No. He wanted to say it then, right there in front of the wiggling salad and half-eaten cilantro nubs, but instead he nodded and filed it away in the special part of his brain marked important alien things. Do not misuse. That evening he found her sketching in the observation deck, not drawing exactly. She was arranging symbols and patterns, layering language like a painter would use color. He sat beside her, quiet. For once you always work here when I need clarity. Mind if I join? She didn't answer, but she didn't tell him to leave either. That was a win. They sat in silence. Nolan watched stars glide past like they were skating through velvet. Iller's stylus moved in elegant sweeps. He finally broke the silence. Do you ever miss your home world? Her hand paused. Sometimes, but I don't belong there anymore. Why not? She took a long breath. I think too loudly, feel too differently there. I was anomalous. Nolan's voice softened. Well, here you fit just fine. She glanced at him. Do I? Sure. You're smarter than everyone. You saved the ship from exploding and you've endured me for nearly a month. That alone qualifies you for sainthood. I'm not familiar with sainthood. It's like being praised excessively for not murdering anyone under stress. I see. He leaned back, arms crossed behind his head. You know, I used to think quiet people had nothing to say. Turns out some of them are just waiting for someone to ask. She turned her head slightly. And you always ask. Annoyingly so. It's not unpleasant. He smiled. Careful, that's practically affection in your language. She raised an eyebrow. If I call you reasonably unobtrusive, will you stop talking temporarily? Then consider it, said. They stayed there for a long while, watching stars. Neither of them had names, for he didn't know what tomorrow would bring or if he'd ever be brave enough to say that Iari phrase aloud. But for now she was beside him, quiet, present, unflinching, and that somehow felt like everything. The intercom crackled with its usual morning enthusiasm, which meant it sounded like a raccoon chewing a toaster. Good morning, Varela crew, came the voice of Captain Dresden, far too chipper for someone who regularly threatened to eject people for sneezing. Near the navigation panel, please be advised we'll be making a supply drop at Outpost 12 in 24 hours. Don't leave socks in the air vents, and whoever reprogrammed the ship's elevator to sing love ballads, report to me immediately. I'm not even angry, I'm just deeply impressed. Nolan was mid-toothbrushing when he choked on his laughter and spat half a mouthful of foam onto the mirror, a garbled curse and several paper towels. Later he stumbled out into the corridor just in time to nearly collide with Arya. Oh hey, he said, trying to sound cool despite looking like he'd lost a battle with his own hygiene routine. Didn't see you there. I noticed, she said, scanning him top to bottom. You're damp. Yep, my sink and I had creative differences. I assumed grooming was less aggressive on Earth, only on weekends. She blinked, visibly processing the sarcasm. That's a joke. He gave a thumbs up with his toothbrush. That's progress. Arya was getting better at reading his humor, or at least recognizing the weird tonal signals humans gave off when attempting to be funny. The first time he'd said, I could eat a black hole, she'd responded with medical concern. The second time she just sighed and asked if he wanted protein paste or crunchy cubes. He followed her toward the common deck, slinging his jacket over one arm. So Outpost 12 ever been twice? She said. Once for diplomatic observation, once to retrieve a wayward ambassador who believed he could negotiate peace with a spore cloud. Was he successful? He inhaled 17 new allergens and proposed to a lamp. Sounds like a success to me. The common area was less chaotic than usual, just two crewmen arguing about whether time dilation made birthdays meaningless, and a Vicari medic juggling mugs of hot caffeine fluid with forearms and zero fear. Nolan grabbed a seat while all Arya opted for standing. Are you ever going to sit while we talk? I don't trust communal furniture. You know, that's actually one of the most human things you've said. She didn't smile, but her ears did twitch, a sign he'd learned to interpret as internally amused but refusing to show it due to pride training or sheer stubbornness. He leaned back. So I've been wondering when you said you don't belong on your home world anymore, is that a bad thing or just a different thing? Her gaze drifted. Society values equilibrium, silence, predictability. I disrupted too many expectations by thinking, feeling, wearing your uniform backwards by asking Questions they didn't want to answer. He whistled low. You must have been fun at dinner parties assuming I was invited. She folded her arms, her expression neutral but her posture slightly tighter. He recognized the signs now. This was her uncomfortable territory he didn't want to push, but he also didn't want to retreat completely. You know, he said, on Earth we've got this idea that being weird is kind of a compliment to fine. Weird, different, unexpected doesn't fit neatly in a labeled box. That sounds inefficient. Yeah, but it also means we get jazz music, pineapple pizza, and people who think pet rocks are emotionally fulfilling. Her nose wrinkled slightly. I regret asking, too late. You're stuck with my species and our culinary abominations. She stared at him. You're one of the strangest beings I've ever met. He beamed. Now that's a compliment. Their brief moment of warmth was interrupted by the sound of a distressed klaxon. Attention, said Janice, the AI sounding distinctly bored. We are receiving an urgent hail from Outpost 12. Please report to the command deck if you are not currently setting something on fire. If you are finished quickly. Nolan and all Arya exchanged a look, then bolted toward the nearest lift on the command deck. Captain Dresden was already frowning at a wall of glitchy transmission feeds. Something's off, she muttered, tapping controls. They sent a general distress code, but it's scrambled. Can't tell if it's a medical emergency, a security threat, or they just ran out of coffee. That last one would justify the alert, said Nolan. Don't joke about caffeine. Lieutenant Arya stepped forward. May I interface with the signal? Be my guest. She connected her wrist pad to the console and murmured to herself in Ilari, her fingers dancing across alien symbols. After a few tense seconds, she frowned. This is a partial code fragment from an older dialect, she said. Not commonly used, almost ceremonial meaning. Dresden asked. Someone's trying to send a private warning and they don't want the whole system to understand it. Sounds like a trap, Nolan said. Sounds like fun, the captain said. Prep a landing team. 30 minutes later, Nolan found himself donning his half-functional field gear, wondering why every time he bonded with someone emotionally it ended with an interstellar crisis. Just once, he muttered, I'd like to finish a conversation without needing body armor. Arya joined him, slipping on a sleek dark Eliari travel vest over her uniform. It had enough hidden compartments to store a small moon. You ready? He asked. I've recharged my translator, recalibrated my phase modulator, and memoized 17 threat protocols. I packed gum. Useful. They stepped onto the transport pod together, the hum of the engines rising beneath their feet as they lifted away from their Varela. Nolan glanced sideways. You know, Arya, if things go sideways, I just want to say your thoughts. Top tier pattern. Really cozy. Her expression didn't change, but her hand brushed his briefly. That's Ilari for you, idiot, isn't it? It's Eliari for I find comfort in your presence. He blinked. Did you just paraphrase the phrase? I adapted it as the stars been around them. An Outpost 12 loomed ahead like a riddle wrapped in a trap. Nolan grinned and adjusted his gear. Whatever was waiting for them, at least he wasn't facing it alone. The transport pod shuddered slightly as it entered Outpost 12's docking bay, a groaning metal yawn that sounded like someone trying to sing opera while gargling nails. Nolan tried not to at the sound. If there was a galactic Yelp, this place would definitely get a 2-star rating, and one of those stars would be for ample parking. Atmosphere is stable, Arya said, reading from her wrist pad. Radiation levels are within tolerances. No visible signs of attack, so the mystery continues. Nolan muttered, tugging at the stiff collar of his jacket. Either this place is under siege or someone sent a dramatic wrong number. The docking doors finally hissed open, revealing the corridor beyond, dimly lit, quiet, and echoing with that particular silence that always preceded something you'd probably regret investigating. Nolan stepped out first, blaster holstered but ready. Hello, friendly crew incoming. No sudden tentacles, please. The corridor remained disappointingly tentacle-free. Arya followed close behind, scanning as she walked. No heat signatures nearby. Internal sensors appear to have been disabled. Okay, that's comforting, Nolan said. It's just a ghost station with a side of ominous quiet. They moved cautiously through their halls, their boots echoing on the metal floor. Posters on the walls promoted outdated safety protocols with cheerful slogans like, report strange noises immediately, and your coworker could be an insect in disguise. Is this supposed to be a Research facility or a horror simulator? Nolan asked. Illyria examined a panel. Records indicate a multi-s's science hub specializing in cross-species behavioral studies, so basically a space zoo for nerds. Essentially, they reached the central operations room. The heavy doors parting with a hiss. Inside was chaos. Overturned chairs blinking red lights and half-eaten protein packets still on desks. Looks like they left in a hurry, Nolan said, or were interrupted. She moved to the main console and began syncing her device. Nolan took a slow walk around the room, resisting the urge to touch literally everything. Then something on the floor caught his eye. Small, round and blinking. Oh, is this a snack or an explosive? I can't tell anymore. Step away from it. Good call. Arya brought up their station logs on the display. Most of the records are encrypted, but I found a partial transmission timestamped 6 hours ago. The screen flickered, showing a grainy image of a panicked Drail, tall, purple with 4 eyes and very little chill. To anyone receiving this, we have a situation. It's not a biological threat, it's psychological. Something is affecting the staff. Emotions running wild, paranoia, euphoria, confessions of love to vending machines. Nolan blinked. Did he say vending machines? Arya nodded. Continue. The drill's voice dropped lower. I think it's the artifact we unearthed it last week. It's doing something. We tried to isolate it, but the screen cut out. Well, that explains everything and nothing. Nolan muttered. What kind of artifact are we talking here? Cursed crystal haunted coffee mug. Arya's brow furrowed. There's a containment room listed in the lower level. Perhaps we'll find answers there, or more haunted office supplies. Lead the way. As they descended through the lower decks, Nolan couldn't help but feel a shift. The lights were dimmer, the air felt heavier, and he swore he heard whispers just at the edge of hearing. Do you feel that? He asked. Illyria nodded slowly. There is something, a pressure, subtle but persistent, like thought residue. Creepy. I hate it. They reached the containment room. Its door sealed with multiple warning signs in several languages, one of them translated loosely to "Oh, not touch." Even if it looks friendly, why do I get the feeling we're about to ignore those signs? Nolan asked. Because we always do, she replied. The door hissed open, and inside was a small glass-walled chamber. Floating in the center, on a bed of softly humming energy, was the artifact. It was nothing dramatic, just a small orb, metallic with intricate symbols glowing faintly on its surface. But even as Nolan looked at it, he felt something stir in his chest. A memory maybe, or an emotion that wasn't entirely his. Okay, he said, backing up a step. That's not normal. Illyria stared at the orb, her posture suddenly tense. It's broadcasting low-frequency emotional resonance. Subconscious manipulation, so basically a mood-altering disco ball. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer. I can feel it searching for what I don't know. Nolan reached out, grabbing her shoulder. Hey, let's not get possessed by ancient space mood rocks today. We've got lunch plans. She blinked, seeming to return to herself. You're right, we need to shut it down. Preferably before someone proposes to a mop. They work quickly, bypassing their control nodes. Ilya's fingers moved and practiced rhythm, murmuring Ilari subutines under her breath. Nolan mostly stood nearby, ready to press buttons or punch things if needed. Done, she said. Finally, signal suppressed. The room's oppressive air lifted slightly. Nolan exhaled. Well, that was unsettling, he said. Let's never do it again. Nodded. But her gaze lingered on the orb. This thing, it was amplifying what people already felt, turning emotions into chaos like a really toxic relationship. But with more glowing. She didn't smile, but her ears twitched. They left the containment room, heading back toward their shuttle. As they walked, Nolan nudged her gently. You okay? I believe so. Still find comfort in my thought patterns. Her eyes met his. I never said I stopped. He grinned. Well then, mission successful. And somewhere behind them the artifact pulsed once dimly, like the sigh of something ancient going back to sleep. Back aboard the Varela, the mood had shifted, partially because the crew was no longer under psychic bombardment by an emotion-amplifying space orb, and partially because Nolan had insisted on hosting an emergency decompression party, which involved him taping up a handwritten sign that read, "Welcome back sanity," over the mess hall entrance, and trying to convince people to wear party hats made of emergency foil blankets. "You've lost it," said Captain Dresden, sipping her synth coffee like it was the only thing keeping her from launching him into orbit. Correction, Nolan said. I found it, my inner party animal. It was trapped under years of mild trauma and interstellar bureaucracy. You're banned from morale duties. That's fair area. stood off to the side observing the spectacle with what might have been mild amusement or psychological concern. Nolan wasn't sure which, but she hadn't left the room, and that counted as encouragement. "You're not wearing a party hat," he said, holding one out to her. It was lopsided and crinkled like it had survived a small explosion, which, to be fair, it probably had. "I am not familiar with the tradition. It symbolizes joy, awkwardness, and a complete disregard for dignity." She said, taking the hat with a kind of reverence. "A ritual of humility, exactly. We humble ourselves before the gods of glitter and duct tape." She perched it delicately atop her head. It immediately slid off one of her long ears. "Is this correct?" "It's perfect," he said, helping her adjust it. "You look like a majestic cosmic unicorn." "I do not know what that is." "That's probably for the best." The crew eventually dispersed, grumbling about schedules and protocols, leaving the two of them alone with flickering lights and the faint smell of burnt popcorn. "I've been thinking," Nolan said, stretching out on the nearest bench, "about that artifact. You think there are more like it?" "Almost certainly. Ancient civilizations rarely created only one mood destabilizing device, which begs the question, why build something that turns people into melodramatic wrecks? Perhaps to understand them or manipulate them or amuse themselves." "You're telling me some ancient alien race invented an emotion bomb just to watch people confess love to vending machines?" She nodded slowly. "It's within the realm of possibility. Space is weirder than I ever imagined." They sat in silence for a moment, not awkward silence, just the kind that comes when two people have survived something bizarre and need a second to catch their breath. Finally, Arya spoke. "What you said before about comfort, that wasn't just the artifact's influence?" "Nope," Nolan said, eyes on the ceiling. "That was all me. Weird human emotions and everything." She shifted slightly. "We don't usually say such things so openly in my culture. It's considered intimate." "Well, then I guess I broke protocol again. Sorry, I'm not." He looked over at her, surprised. It was disorienting, she admitted, but also not unwelcome. While he said, "That's practically romantic by Ilari standards. I once read that in your culture romance includes dramatic gestures, poetic words, and the throwing of small stones at windows. We call that courtship or vandalism, depends on the context." She tilted her head. "Would now be an appropriate time for a dramatic gesture?" Nolan blinked. "I mean, yeah, if you're planning one, now's as good as any." She stood, approached him, and without warning reached out to lightly touch his forehead with her own. Her long ears curled slightly, brushing against his temple. "This is an Ilari gesture of sincere regard," she said very seriously. "It is performed between those whose minds are aligned in mutual curiosity." Nolan's heart was doing something weird and probably illegal. "I think my mind just applied for dual citizenship." She pulled back and looked at him with something close to a smile. "I'm adapting." "Well, you're doing a great job. Next you'll be making bad puns and refusing to ask for directions." "I already do the second thing." He laughed, and their sound filled the room like gravity reasserting itself, but their moment was interrupted by the intercom bridge. "To Lieutenant Nolan and Ensign Arya, we have a situation." Nolan groaned and stood up. "Why is it always us?" "Because you're very loud," came the voice of Janice, the ship's AIA. Followed him toward the exit. "Duty calls. Can't we just send a strongly worded letter instead?" They reached the bridge, where Dresden was already pulling up a transmission on the screen. "We've got another distress call, this time from a freighter near the Kepler Rift. Signals clearer than the last one, but it's odd." The message played. A human captain appeared, looking slightly delirious. "This is the Wanderlust requesting assistance. We're experiencing anomalies. Crew behavior is erratic. We may have encountered a psychological weapon, or I don't know, something's making us say things, feel things. One of my engineers is crying over a shoe." Ari and Nolan exchanged a look. "Another artifact?" she asked. "Either that," Nolan said, "or really intense poetry night." Dresden turned to them. "I'm sending you both again." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Are we becoming the weird emotion cleanup team?" "Apparently. Pack your awkward feelings and go." They returned to their quarters to prepare, and for a moment the air between them was thick with the unspoken. Arya finally said, "If this happens again, if the artifact affects us, I want you to know I trust you. Even if I say something irrational, I'll trust you too." He said, "Unless you propose to the vending machine, then I'm staging an intervention. I have no interest in vending machines." "Good, I'd hate to lose you to a snack dispenser." They smiled at Each other tentatively honestly and gathered their gear. Another mystery awaited, but for once the unknown didn't feel quite so lonely. The wanderlust hung motionless against the pale shimmer of the Kepler rift like a bug frozen mid-buzz in a bottle of honey-colored starlight. Nolan stared at it through the Vareller's viewport and muttered something that sounded vaguely like, "Oh no, not again," followed by a string of words there. Universal translator politely refused to process. From beside him Illyria spoke in her usual calm tone. Preliminary scans show elevated cortisol levels in the crew and several anomalous heat patterns, suggesting erratic behavior, possibly interpretive dancing, possibly violence. The two are difficult to differentiate at this resolution, so we're walking into either a mutiny or a bad musical great. Nolan said, tugging his jacket tighter. I packed for neither. They boarded the Wanderlust cautiously, weapons stowed but fingers twitching. The ship interior was dim, corridors cast in flickering red emergency light which gave everything a haunted, overly dramatic flair, like walking through a theater right after the critics had left scathing reviews. "Hello," Nolan called out, "we're friendly. We brought snacks and therapy if needed." Silence answered, then slowly the faint sound of humming drifted through the air. A voice, female, soft, a little wobbly. "My heart is like a vacuum seal," sang their voice. "It's hard to feel, but still I feel." "That's either a cry for help or a demo tape," Nolan whispered. They followed the sound to the main commons area. A crew member stood alone, barefoot, surrounded by a circle of glowing post-it notes and crying softly as she sang to a mop nearby. A man furiously painted a mural of a toaster crying in the rain. Illyria raised her scanner, confirmed artifact influence resonance pattern matches that of the Outpost 12 orb. Nolan stared. Who keeps making these things, and why are they all so emotionally needy? They found the artifact in engineering, a sleek cube with shifting fractal patterns along its surface, humming like it was halfway through a very personal monologue. "Same type," Arya said, "only this one's tuned to lyrical expression. It's causing the crew to externalize feelings through art and music. I've been on worse ships," Nolan said. "One guy got infected with a mindworm and wrote a 900-page epic about his favorite chair." As they approached the artifact, it pulsed, and Nolan suddenly felt the urge to confess something deeply personal. He turned to all Arya. "Wide-eyed, if I start reciting poetry about my socks, shoot me." Understood. Together they began the shutdown sequence. This time they were ready. Arya isolated the signal patterns, while Nolan maintained environmental stability and gently moved a crew member away from licking the containment panel. The artifact resisted, sending pulses of raw emotional intensity, waves of longing, regret, infatuation. Nolan felt memories swirl to the surface, a childhood spent staring at the stars, a love once lost. The moment he realized space was lonelier than anyone liked to admit. Arya stiffened beside him, her expression tight. "It's trying to amplify unresolved feelings. If we hesitate, we won't," he said, and reached for her hand. It was a small thing, fingers brushing fingers, but it anchored them. Nolan fed the shutdown code in with one hand while holding onto hers with the other, like that connection was there one true constant in a galaxy built on chaos. With a final low sigh, the artifact dim silence fell, not emptiness but relief. The emotional storm passed. Their crew, dazed but recovering, began to shuffle out of their art installations and whispered monologues. One woman, holding a balloon with a drawn-on face, gently set it down with a murmured apology. Back on the Varela they debriefed with Captain Dresden, who watched them like someone trying to decide if they were brilliant or completely unstable. 2 artifacts neutralized on, she said, 2 crews saved, and 0 vending machine marriages. "I suppose I should be grateful. I accept gift baskets," Nolan offered, dismissed before I changed my mind later. In the quiet of the observation deck, Nolan and all Arya sat side by side, staring out into the drift of stars. "I'm not the same person who joined this crew," Nolan said eventually. "I used to think space was about missions, reports, objectives. Now I think it's about finding someone to sit within the silence." Arya looked at him, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "We've both changed," he nodded. "Do you ever worry we'll get used to this, that we'll stop being surprised?" "I hope not," she said. "Surprise is the first step to understanding." While he said that's surprisingly deep for someone who once tried to mind wrestle an espresso machine. "I won." "Fair enough." They sat in silence again, comfortable now, familiar, not because everything was perfect but because they'd been through enough to know perfection wasn't the goal. Connection was. He turned to her, smiled. You're still beautiful, you know. She tilted her head, considering. I still do not understand the metric you don't have. He said, you just have to trust me. I do. Her hand found his again, ungloved. This time warm, real. Beyond the window the stars kept spinning. Missions would come, more artifacts, more mysteries, more unexpected songs about feelings and appliances. But whatever the galaxy threw at them next, Nolan knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone anymore, and that made older